So welcome everybody, if you'd just like to take a seat. This is our session on corporate governance and investor stewardship in Asia. And I'm delighted to be joined by three very experienced investors. Iguchi is Chief Corporate Governance Officer and Executive Director at Nissay Asset Management here in Japan. Anne-Maree is Head of Sustainability and Stewardship Asia Pacific at Impax Asset Management. And Anne-Maree O'Connor is Head of Responsible Investment at the New Zealand Super Fund. Before we get started, I'd like each of the panelists to briefly introduce yourselves, if you don't mind, perhaps starting with George as our host.
Right. Kerrie, it's a very honor to work with you on this panel. And PRY, thank you very much for having me here. My name is Iguchi, and I work for Nissay Asset Management, as Kerrie said, and responsible for stewardship activities. And I used to be a former ICGN board and work with the Kerrie and Louise, and now the currently nomination committee of the ICGN. And now, currently, I'm deeply involved with the iFirst Foundation's work. I'm the iFirst Advisory Council member and also a board member of the SSBJ and setting the sustainability standard, disclosure standard. That's it. Okay.
Thank you very much. And you're heavily involved in lots of initiatives here in Japan. So we're very grateful for all of your good work as well.
Thank you very much.
Nana.
Yes. So my name is Anne-Maree. I'm the Head of Sustainability and Stewardship for APAC of Impax Asset Management. So we are a UK fund and very specialized in investment in renewable energy related energy transition related business, trying to help the transition to a more sustainable economy. And I have been working with Kerrie also for a long time, and as a member of previously the Shareholder Rights Committee and now the Financial Capital Committee of the ICGN. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Nana. And you're also heavily involved at the ACGA, our very good friend, and doing great work with them too. Anne-Maree.
Yes, I'm Anne-Maree O'Connor. I'm Head of Sustainable Investment for the New Zealand Superannuation Fund. We're a buffer fund set up to help smooth the payment for future superannuation in New Zealand. We're around about 60 billion New Zealand dollars. Part of our Act, and in our Act we have a requirement to have policies around the protection of shareholder rights, and obviously voting comes into that. So that's part of my team's role, is to make sure that we have policies and implement them.
And New Zealand are doing some really great work, particularly the Stewardship Code. Yes. So excited to hear more about that in a moment.
Yes.
So I'm Kerrie Waring, CEO of the ICGN. For those of you that may not know ICGN, we are largely an investor-led organisation with members based in over 40 countries, representing around 77 trillion. We were set up over 30 years ago, and we're all about promoting high standards of good governance and stewardship, ultimately contributing to long-term value creation and the benefits that has then on society as a whole. I'm also very engaged here in Japan. I serve on the Council of Experts convened by the FSA and TSC. So looking forward to hearing from many of you in the audience from Japan in terms of how you think progress is going in terms of the FSA's reforms on accelerating corporate governance practices here in Japan. Perhaps before we get stuck into the questions, let's just reflect again on what we mean by corporate governance and investor stewardship. Fundamentally, as Sir Adrian Cadbury described, over 30 years ago, corporate governance is the system by which companies are directed and controlled based on those age-old OECD principles of fairness, accountability, responsibility, and transparency. Remember, the G20 OECD principles have just been republished. If you're not aware of that, Google them, download the latest set of principles from the OECD. So corporate boards, their role is to provide strategic direction, risk oversight, and the effective oversight of management's plans and performance in promoting the long-term success of the company. And investors hold them to account for doing that on behalf of their beneficiaries and clients through stewardship activities, including monitoring, voting, and engagement. And I think it's really important to keep reminding ourselves that both are responsible for preserving and enhancing long-term value upon which we all rely. So with that, let's just dwell a little bit about stewardship and your interpretation of it. Anne-Maree, can you tell us more about your perspective on this, particularly around the New Zealand Stewardship Code?
Yes, okay. So I'll talk about the code first. So the New Zealand Stewardship Code is a year old. It now is a voluntary code. The signatories to it cover about 60% of assets under management. It came out of two areas. It really came out of a lot of work over time on corporate governance codes and the formation of New Zealand Corporate Governance Forum in New Zealand. And looking at how, on the other side, investors themselves were expected to have codes around governance. So we've been reviewing different codes around the world. The activities of the PRI and the ICGN had actually upskilled quite a number of us in the market anyway around engagement and stewardship. But then what came in to being was our Sustainable Finance Action Plan for New Zealand. And as part of that 2-year program, it was noted that New Zealand was a little bit behind the world, where there were a lot of stewardship codes, and stewardship codes had a lot of potential to help improve sustainability. So therefore our code is both sort of born from a sustainability and a sort of corporate governance place. And quite similarly, I suppose we've drawn mainly on the UK and Australian stewardship codes, but also the Japanese code, which references sustainability. And Singapore also played a role in that. So that's the sort of beginnings of the code. I can go into detail, but let me know when you want.
Thank you very much. Well, it was a good segue into the Japan code then, George. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I saw the many Japanese here, so for them it might be boring, but I would like to update Japan Stewardship Code to overseas investors and overseas audience. In Japan, as you know, the Stewardship Code affects the stewardship and corporate governance very significantly. I think there are two reasons why the Stewardship Code is so effective in Japan. Firstly, although I want to say that it is a soft law, not a hard law, there are two reasons. One is the FSA regulators set this code, and in Japan the government is very influential in Japan. And secondly, major asset owners also comply this stewardship code, and they try to use this code to assess the asset managers. Then from the asset managers like me, it is becomes a business case, and so and many asset managers try to strengthen their capacity, and that lead to the active engagement and active voting. And about the direction of the stewardship code, as Anne-Maree mentioned about, globally there are, I think, the variety of the reason to introduce stewardship code. In the Stockholm ICGN conference, I was very surprised to hear the stewardship code in South Africa. They focus on the infrastructure and diversity. So I think that the stewardship code is tend to be connected with the important thing or crucial thing in each society and in economy. So in Japan, the most important thing at that time was the low profitability of companies. So it was introduced to raise the corporate profitability. That's the reason why the Japan Stewardship Code. But in 2020, code was revised and include ESG integration or ESG consideration in the stewardship responsibility that facilitate integration of ESG factors in investment process furthermore in Japan. That Anne-Maree mentioned about. 2023, the code is revised every 3 years, and this year should be the timing of the revising SHRAB code, but the code is not, or revision is not postponed, and instead they are FSA or your follow-up council, Kerrie belong to, focus on the substance from the form. So what substance mean is in the corporate governance side, facilitating sustainability management of the companies, including sustainability reporting, and increasing the board effectiveness. That includes the education of the outside directors, and also in stewardship side, that facilitate investing more resources in the stewardship activities to the asset managers, and also resolving issues relating with the collective engagement. Maybe we will discuss later. And the summary, so Japan Stewardship Code has contributed to the stewardship and the governance and also sustainability initiative in Japan. But currently, that started focus on the substance rather than the form. That is my update. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thank you. So, Nana, from your perspective, as an active manager with an Asia focus, how do you interpret your own stewardship responsibilities?
Yeah, so I have to say now I'm a bit embarrassed because I'm Chinese and we don't have a stewardship code yet. But I was told we're going to have one very soon. So, but for Impax, yeah, we have had a long-term voting policy, 100% voting policy, just like many European asset managers. And we come up with our own voting decisions from our proxy advisor, but also we have spent quite a lot of time deciding our own decisions on different resolutions. I can talk more about this maybe later. And I think the other big chunk of my time really spent on engagement. So engagement, one is with the companies we invest in. We have a very strict policy that we have to engage with the company one-on-one before we make the investment. So after we be able to engage with the company one-on-one to clarify some issues and also to make sure we have the communication channel, then we can make the investment. Then after making the investment, we have a policy also to have the engagement at least once every 12 months. And also when there's ad hoc issues or there's campaigns that we lead, we also talk to the companies quite frequently. The other aspect, which I think is a bit different from some other asset managers, is we talk to regulators also quite often. So we do think that investors have a role to play to improve the standards of different markets. Especially in Asia, I think, because many markets still very top-down driven. So you can only achieve that much when talking to companies. So talking to regulators is very important. And we do this by, one is submitting our public consultation responses to the public consultations. This year, in Asia, we responded to the Hong Kong EX climate risk disclosure consultation. And also just last month, the Singapore SGX and Accra ESB consultation disclosure. So this is one way, and the other way is with professional bodies help like ICGN, like PRI, like ACGA. We also talk to regulators directly and meet with them. For example, last week we were here to meet with all the Japanese key regulators with the ACGA delegation. And also this afternoon, we are going to join the ICGN mini delegation also with the regulators here. So we do that quite often and trying to express our voices with regulators when we can.
And thank you for elaborating on your policy engagement work, because we often think about stewardship as being investee company engagement. And in fact, more and more codes now, including ICGNs, are encouraging you all to think about systemic and market-wide stewardship and how you therefore then engage with policymakers to bring about systemic change. So this is thinking about, protecting your rights to be able to hold companies to account, pushing back on dual class share structures around the world or opaque, acting in concert rules. So on that bandwagon, then we're going to start with just a perspective on policy engagement, thinking about some of the macro issues that are impacting us, and then bring it back down to company engagement. So Anne-Maree, what's your biggest bugbearer and how are you engaging policymakers on it?
Right. Well, first of all, I'd like to point out that corporate governance was indeed recognised as a systemic risk, and that is why the codes evolved. So we have always been dealing with a systemic risk in our portfolios and been active on that through our voting processes. Now, policy engagement. Yes, there's policy engagement on voting and on governance, and that's really important, and we're very active on that in our own market. And we rely a lot on ICGN and other and ACSI and other membership organisations in other markets. And hopefully we'll have a bit of time to talk about the very concerning changes in the UK code, because we know that will have knock-on effects to New Zealand.
Just tell us a little bit more about what it is that's worrying you about that.
So when we were developing our own corporate governance code in New Zealand, and it's been quite recent too, and it accompanies the listing rules, we drew a lot on the UK and on Australia. And they have a very active environment, regulatory environment around shareholder rights. I'd say we're a little bit more laissez-faire, over time in New Zealand. We have been. And what's very concerning is in the UK, it looks like we will no longer be able to vote on major transactions or conflicts or party conflicts. And this is a fundamental shareholder right, and really we should be having a whole morning session on how do you stop this influencing other markets. Mm-hmm. So this is the real reaction, as if our whole portfolio has to lend itself to the tech industry and how we attract listings in the tech industry, because that's really where it's coming from. And that's where we get a lot of poor corporate governance actually in that industry.
Sure.
But I'm sure you'd be able to talk to that better than me.
Well, just and just to clarify, the FCA is consulting at the moment, and it is all about increasing the attractiveness of the UK market, and all markets are doing the same. And there's consultation around the degree to which investors, for example, can use their rights on significant transactions or related party transactions. They're watering down dual class share mitigation issues, for example. Sunset clauses are moving from 5 to 10 years and so on. So if you are interested in the UK market, take a look at that consultation and please relay your views. But the other game changer, and I don't know if many of you were in the session this morning, I was on with Sue Lloyd and David Atkin on corporate sustainability reporting. I mean, it's a game changer. It really eradicates one of the biggest obstacles that you will face in terms of clarity of information. And George is on the Sustainable Standards Board of Japan. So tell us a little bit about that, George, and how that then links into the ISSB.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Before talking about the SSBJ, I would like to update the sustainability disclosure, which started this year in Japan, a little bit. As Takada-san, FSA, and Komori-san, ISSB board mentioned at the plenary session in the day one, all listed Japanese companies, I mean the 6,600 companies, it's so many, but they are required to report material sustainability issues in the statutory annual report that we call the UHO. That started this year. And disclosure form is based on the 4 categories, like as you are accustomed to like the TCFD or ISSB, like the governance and strategy and risk management and metrics and targets. But the contents of each category is not decided So like the ISSB S1, the companies are required to decide what is the sustainability issue for them and disclose it. That's the current disclosure of the UHO. When I look through the actual disclosure in the annual report, I found 2 things. The one thing is the climate change and the human capital, including the human right, dominant topics. I also think these 2, topics are very important. But when I look at the company, I think there are other sustainability issues in the company. So I expect more disclosure next year from the company. The other thing is the governance categories. Many disclosure tend to focus on the role of the management, but not the role of the governance. That is I think the one issue to be improved, because to address the sustainability issues, I think the role of the governance is very, very important. So I think that I expect the Japanese company will change the way of addressing that. And sorry, to go back to your question about SSBJ. We have started, SSBJ has started developing Japan sustainability standards based on the ISSB standards. What we are doing is we carefully look at the ISSB standards by words, and then whether the standards is applied to Japan or not. It is very tiring work, but I can say so far so good. It means what I mean that so far so good is currently that we developing standards which mirrors or the identical to ISB standards in the substance. So SSBJ will finish this consultation paper by the end of next year and finalize it by the end of March 2025. And the FSA Japan regulator already showed the direction. They plan to apply the SSBJ standards to sustainability disclosure in statutory report. So ISB standards or SSBJ standards have the very big impact on the Japanese sustainability standards. And I have the two asking to here because I think the PRY is the investor-led organization. And you, ICGN CEO, so I would like to ask the two things to the ICGN PRI. One thing is I say so far so good, but there is the risk, strong response from business society, and it always happens in the disclosure world. Actually, I heard it happened in the other countries. In Japan, it's okay. It has not happened yet. So I ask for help. At the time, in that case, something such a thing happened. So at that time, please help me and send support, a strong and not negative but constructive opinion to me, because I'm the board member of the SSBJ representing the investors. The other thing, one more thing is since the ICB standard is the global standard, so PRI and ICGN should pressure not only Japan, but other countries, including the Asia, and hopefully US, to adopt ICSBB standard. That will make our work much easier. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, George. So, of course, we welcome and support the work of the ISSB, but we also support the work of EFRAG and the ESRS and the work that's happening in Europe. So it is a matter of understanding the slight nuances in different markets. But ultimately, both sets of standards, I think, are working towards providing decision-useful information for investors towards long-term value creation. So that has to be applauded. I want to move to company engagement, and we do have an audience question for you, Nana. And do send in questions by Slido, and we're going to allow for 20 minutes questions at the end if you want to stand up and make statements as well. ICGN is reviewing our global stewardship principles. We actually published our principles in 2003. It was called the Institutional Shareholder Responsibilities Statement. And we're going to be relaunching this and engaging with you all shortly. But on company engagement, we think that investors should ensure constructive engagement to mitigate risk and enhance opportunities to create long-term value on behalf of beneficiaries and clients. In particular, we're going to drill down into how engagement themes are determined. I observe, looking at how many of our members already do this, there are usually 4 to 6 buckets, nature, climate, human capital, digitalization, and certainly governance. And also, how do you prioritize your engagements? Is it vote-driven, circumstantial? Is it strategic? Or is it based on your size of shareholding, geography, or fund type? So I guess my question to the panel is, how do you determine your engagement themes and priorities, and what are they? So Nana, just starting with you on that question, and also the question from the audience to you, which is kind of related. When you mention you engage with companies prior to investment, are these meetings purely focused on ESG? example, Impax ESG specialists, or could this include investment research meetings? And that's from Lucy Martin.
Yes, so this is, I think I can talk about our engagement strategy and process. So every year we actually have a meeting, talk about all the engagement themes we want to define for this year. This is within the sustainability team, but also because we are long-term active investor and our portfolio tend to be quite concentrated actually on the companies we think are making contributions to the transition. And also can make a positive financial return in the long term. So for each company, our lead analyst of the company and the PM, they will have to define at least three engagement priorities when they are making the fundamental research of the company. And we have also a proprietary ESG rating system, which we built since day one of the company, so early 2000. And we've been using that, upgrading that since the last 25 years. And this is how we define for individual company the engagement priorities. When we go to the company, we have the lead analyst and also one member, or at least from the sustainability team, also need to join the meeting. And it can be a meeting of financial as well as non-financial aspects. But also if we have a particular theme that we want to talk to the company, that can also focus on just on the ESG theme of the company.
Okay, thank you. Can we talk about governance, because this panel is about governance and stewardship. So when you are engaging with companies, what is your numero uno governance priority that you'd like to, that you usually like to discuss? I know it's probably individual by company, so we'll go to you, Nana, then Anne-Maree, and then George.
Yeah, so it is a case-by-case situation, but I think this year we have talked, I think for Asia still, we are talking about the board diversity and also board independence. I think there's really two main topics we have spoken to companies. Independence, including the board and also subcommittees of the companies. In Japan, for example, we still have a lot of kansanyaku structure companies, and then the independence of the kansanyaku and also of the nomination committee, audit committee. Still, we are getting there, I think, for a majority independence for many of these subcommittees. And diversity also is a quite big theme for us this year, and I can talk more later, but we talk a lot with our companies on gender diversity of the board this year, and how they nominate in the process, how they are nominating the directors, and how do they make the gender effect into the selection process, and also how do they find a pipeline actually of qualified female directors. So we talk a lot about that. And another aspect we spoke to more broad portfolio companies is the ownership structure of the company, and how does that affect the management style, and also how the company oversees sustainability issues, because that is really important for many of the companies we own. Sustainability should be part of their business model. So how the management and also how the board is discussing these issues, and how do they build a structure or framework in place to make sure there's good internal controls of all these issues. I think it's also very important to us.
Thank you. Anne-Maree?
Okay. So the way we prioritize, I suppose there's two elements to that. That's regional and global, and then there's thematic. So because we're one of the largest investors in the New Zealand market, it's natural for us to focus our direct engagement in the New Zealand market. So what we do there is, on the governance side, we're very focused on how well boards are developing their strategies, and how they are actually disclosing to investors and shareholders their long-term strategic goals, and that's on their businesses. And underpinning that, of course, there are environmental and social challenges and issues that we expect them to develop strategies for. So some of the key issues on New Zealand boards are independence. So we're having a lot of discussion with New Zealand directors who don't really understand the global view on what independence means. They almost take it as an insult to be told that they're not independent. So we're having quite a lot of educational conversations with boards. We're looking at skills and succession planning, and we've worked over the last probably 10 years around gender representation, and making sure that people were aware that we had the same pool of directors just rotating around boards. So we put quite a lot of focus on tenure. and set a sort of 10-year tenure around independence. And that's really helped to bring women into the market, to refresh our pool of directors. Now, of course, diversity and inclusion in the New Zealand market also is around Indigenous representation, Te Ao Māori. We haven't done enough of a focus on that at the governance level yet. So that will probably be more of a focus for us next year. This year, our focus has been in leveraging off the Climate-Related Disclosures Act that came into New Zealand, which covers Scope 1, 2 and 3 reporting, and that includes large investors. And we are looking to a team tag with ISSB, so external reporting body has already brought out its guidelines, but they are cross-referencing with ISSB in detail. So leveraging off that, we now have an engagement run by the Crown financial institutions in New Zealand and their investors to engage with the top NZX 50 companies, not only on how they will report, but what's a good report? So, what is your strategy? How are you doing scenario analysis? And we're learning together because we ourselves are learning. We've just reviewed what climate scenarios we will use. So that's the New Zealand market. And when it comes to environmental, human rights, safety, labour issues, pay, all of that, we don't prioritise so much. We actually look at the company and see what is the most material issue to that company. So that's your deep dive fundamental. Now we've got mostly outside of New Zealand passive and multi-factor and quantitative type of exposures to listed equities and bonds. So in that way, we need to rely very much on our engagement providers. So we rely on Columbia Threadneedle, CTI, to do a lot of our engagement with companies where it's in-depth engagement. We want to have managers also that are active on engagement. Some of the more quanti managers don't really see companies as companies. They're just like numbers, okay, and models. So we have sort of we in-housed our own voting and our engagement. And we publish and report to the board annually, and we publish quarterly the CTI engagement reports. Our voting's all public on the website, and we rely on quite a customised voting policy, which then we have ISS execute, which includes the ESG. Our kind of key 3 engagement themes across the Crown financial institutions have not changed much over 10 years, and they are severe human rights breaches, severe environmental damage, bribery and corruption, and climate change. And so those are kind of the themes for the global portfolios.
Thank you. George, tell us about Japan.
I don't know, it's not only the Japanese case, but in terms of the priorities, I think that engagement agenda is not, changing every year. It is a lasting one. But when we talk about from the long-term, basis, then I think that we cannot neglect the sustainability agendas are increasingly important every year, and will be much more important since sustainable society is coming to us very close, and also that sustainability issues impact the enterprise value very significantly. We expect so. That is the sustainability issue is the most important issue, and especially in the sustainability issues, I focus on the human capital. In sustainability agenda, since human capital is the key to transition to the sustainability society, and I think it plays a central role in the company change the business model or raise the resilience for the sustainability issues. So I always check the engage how the companies utilize workforce and also incentivize and train workforce to tackle sustainable issues. And the other thing is the governance issues. I think, as I said, it's very important issues, and especially the what sustainable issues we talked about is the long-term issue that affect the enterprise value. So that should be monitored by the board and the governors. So in that sense, it's very important. And when I look at the ISSB standards and the governance section, that says that the company are required to disclose the what kind of skill or the competence of the board to address the sustainability issues and what kind of thing the board is discussed. That is the equivalent with the board effectiveness when we investor talk. So in that sense, I think in disclose. In substance, the governance is more important in the address the sustainable issues. Also, in the disclosure world, the governance is very important. That's all.
Thank you very much. Now we're getting quite a stream of questions coming through, so we might go through some of these before we go back to the original plan, which always goes out the window when you're on a panel. The first question is around board diversity rules in Japan. And yes, the Cabinet Office has recommended that there should be at least one female person on the board by 2025 and 30% across now this is a bit complicated, across the board directors, executive officers, and
Shinkuyaku-in, yes.
and Kansai-yaku, basically, because there's 3 board systems in Japan, so it's 30% across all of that. My understanding is that it will be transposed into the stock exchange listing rules later this year, and so that's how it will be implemented. Nana, you did some great work with ACGA on this. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, so just briefly, so last September, we co-signed a letter written by ACGA to the FSA and TSE on this very topic to raise the awareness of this, because Japan really, among the Asian markets, is one of the laggards, I think, in this regard. And that letter earlier this year was submitted to the Cabinet Office. And we were told it has something to do with the Prime Minister's statement in April on the 30% by 2030 commitment. So we were very encouraged by the commitment. Then in June, we wrote a series of letters to all over Japanese holding companies that don't have 30% female on board, which is almost all of them. So we had a follow-up meetings with all of them. And last Friday, we had co-hosted a roundtable discussion event with ACGA on this topic. And we had the Deputy General from the Gender Equality Bureau of the Cabinet Office join us for a 2-hour non-stop discussion on this issue. So Karu-san here, she's one of the speakers at that event. And also, I think quite a few participants here. We had a full house of 70 participants from regulators, investors, and companies joined us for this topic. So this is not the first attempt, I have to say, for Japan to push this. And we've witnessed a few previous attempts failed. But I think this time, with the government support and also with the regulators making the listing rules, I think we are seeing changes.
And you guys need to walk the talk. Is anyone from Norges in the room? Elisa? So Norges, do you want to explain? Just get your mic.
Thank you very much. So our voting guideline includes an expectation for 1/3 or 30% women on boards, or well, each gender on boards. We haven't been able to apply this guideline fully for Japan as one of the few only developed markets. But this year we've actually changed this, and we are now voting against boards if they don't have at least one woman.
And what was your independence change as well?
And the independence change was requiring 2 independent directors, and now we've moved to 1/3, whereas our voting guideline expects majority independent boards, obviously.
Brilliant. Let's all follow Norges' suit. I have to say, ICGN itself will be reflecting on our recommendations on independence proportions into the new year. Anne-Maree, we have a question for you. How do you work with your external managers to advance corporate governance practices?
Well, actually, in New Zealand, there's not many sustainability teams. So you're working with your external managers and the actual investment managers and analysts responsible for those companies. And they send their recommendations, for example, on voting directly to us. And then we will look at that against the custom policy, and we'll have some quite detailed discussions where these don't agree. So our managers will be engaging with the companies leading up to the AGM, and where there is a really structurally poor issue within companies, they'll be having engagements during the year so that they are well prepared should they have votes against at the following AGM. They will know why that's happening. So that's one way in which we are working with our managers.
Thank you. Another audience question. As George mentioned, the Stewardship Code is a soft law, but the role of the government is very important. What kind of incentives and tools can be taken to promote the Stewardship Code in other Asian markets?
Thank you. That is very good. I think that firstly, there might be some culture in Japan very diligent and to follow the rule, even though that is not so slow. And having said that, I think the important thing is the government commit to in Japan, the FSA commit to that rule. And also the asset owners have very influential over the asset managers. So they try to use that, when they give the mandate to the asset managers, they use that, whether they follow that rule. That become the, as I said, business case. So that is important. Yes. Let's talk about the diversity.
Yeah, I'll let you
so,
talk about it, sure.
So because I saw the many Japanese institutional investors, so I just, on behalf of them, I want to just about for 40 minutes. So now currently, Japanese institutional investors also changed the voting policy and demanding the 1/3 of the outside directors, and also female directors on the board. If they don't have Japanese institutional investors voting against the companies. That's happening in the Japanese institutional investors. Yeah.
Okay. So, Nana, there's a question about differences in engagement, Asia versus Europe. You're perfect to answer that question.
I cannot say Asia is just more difficult. I think it's on very different dimensions. I think for Asia, one thing is getting the corporate access is sometimes still not that easy. There comes, I think it's very important for platforms like ICGN, like ACGA, PRI to encourage more collaborative engagements in different Asian markets. And we discussed this a lot actually with Japanese regulators last week. That's one thing. And the second thing is also the response you get from companies, even if you can't have the access and you can't have the meeting, which is often the case we found in Japan before. So it's easy for you to get a response and to set a meeting, they always welcome you. But then after you go for the meeting and after you left, nothing has changed. So we have that like merry-go-round for like 10 years, then that's not helping anyone. So I think things are changing now in a couple 2-3 years, in the past couple 5 years maybe. So this is I think encouraging, but still I think from the corporate side, I think there really needs to be more training, I think, for the IR in terms of how do they answer questions related to sustainability and ESG, etc. I had a meeting recently with an Asian company we hold, and I said, how do you manage physical climate risk? And the company said, oh, if it rains, we just close the door. And my lead analyst from London after the meeting told me he almost fell off his chair when he heard this answer, because in Europe, you would never get that kind of answer. So it's just how premature, I think, some of the IRs here are to these questions. I also had experience that we are talking about this issue with management, and they are very happy to talk about other performance prospects. But as soon as we move to the ESG chapter, they delegate somebody else or some other people to answer these questions. It's just difficult for me as an investor to convince me that they really overseeing these issues with a caring mind, I think. So I think there also needs to be more training for the executives and also directors on these matters.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions here about governance in controlled firms and how, as minority investors, you can exert your influence. So who wants to pick that one up?
I think this is where collaboration with other investors comes in. So, I mean, you're often in a minority situation. In New Zealand, we have a lot of major investors. So you'll have blocks of shareholdings, and what you really how you try and address that is through majority independence. So very much through your voting on the directors on the boards. So that's certainly one way that we we try and address that issue. And it is common across Asia as well. So really, in that way, when we're not close to the company and we've got a small shareholding, we just use a really active voting policy, and we publish that policy so they know, so that we'll be voting against.
And this is where your policy advocacy really comes into play, because mechanisms like dual class share structures aren't in your best interests in that,
that's
that
true.
sense.
Yeah.
George?
Yeah, that is very difficult question. In Japan, also there are many subsidiary listed companies, and again, on behalf of the Japanese institutional investors, now we have the change the voting policy to demand half of the independent directors in the such control companies. But I don't think it is enough. But what we can do is that both, as the Anne-Maree said, we show their investors' opinion by voting. That's all. Yeah.
Okay. Did you want to comment on this as well, Nana?
Yeah, so I just want to now point out the work of ICGN. So I'm still chair of the China Working Group of ICGN, and since 2018 we established this working group, as well as the Japan and the Korea Working Group, to really focus on trying to raise the voice of minority shareholders. And within the CWG, we have 6 subgroups that are engaging with different Chinese companies, and all the subgroups are co-lead by different members. And Katie Collins here is our co-lead for the Meituan group, have made tremendous progresses with the company over the last 2 to 3 years by engaging with them. So I think, as Anne-Maree said, we often in a minority position in Asia. Even if you're a large asset manager, you're always a minority, and it's very difficult when you don't have access and you don't have an effective channel to communicate with the company. So collaboratively talking to the company when you have aligned interests, I think is very important. And the leadership when you're making this kind of contributions is also very important.
Mm-hmm. Good advice. And so there's a question here about getting under the bonnet of the quality of independent directors. So we often obviously talk about the quantity, but possibly more important is the quality. How do you assess the quality of board directors in the disclosures that you receive, and how do you then engage with companies on that? Maybe George?
Yeah, that's very, not only the independent directors, you mean?
Well, what's the disclosure like around the...
Okay, so I always look at the Japan, the disclosure of the board effectiveness, and that is whether that will address the issues in the companies. And then also we look at the skill of the skill set, because now in Japan, the skill matrix that shows which skills that each board members has. That is very important suggestion, and whether that will match the issues, important issues, including sustainability issues in the companies. Those things I check, and that matches. Then I think it's kind of the judgment, but it's what we can do. We cannot, we cannot have the exact answers because we cannot see the boardroom. But from those information, we can judge the board is effective. That's all.
Thank you. Anne-Maree, quality of directors.
Well, there's several ways. One, it is the role of the nomination committee to actually put forward a decent suite of directors. So one of the things we do is we focus on the nomination committee and its independence. So we do find when there's a lot of, and excuse me, old boys on that, or old girls with long tenure on nomination committees, that not the right decisions are made. We don't believe. So we'll look at the nomination committees. We will expect them to publish a skills matrix. We worked with other shareholder associations in New Zealand, and then the listing rules and companies and institutes of directors to come up with a standard format around reporting on skills and reporting on succession planning. So that was really useful because it sent we got some consensus around that. So now we've got really quite good information on the skill sets. That doesn't mean that disasters don't always happen and you find that you didn't actually have the right skills after all. So that's probably the way we're doing it. And then we are ourselves voting when we do not agree that the board is right or set up right. So that's probably, I mean, internationally, we've got certain voting rules or guidelines around nomination committees.
Thank you. And Nana, and what about state representatives on boards? How do they influence? I mean, I'm thinking China specifically here.
I think, yeah, it's obviously, and we have, I think many of you have seen this report. There has been some golden shares with tech companies in China in the past few years. I was interviewed for some of them happening. I think it's difficult, obviously, when you are a private company, and how do you, especially in a political system like China, you cannot just resist to that. So you have to work with that. And as a company, how do you then balance your autonomy when you have a state member or a state representative on the board? I have to say, I think from my understanding, most of the state representatives are there to monitor the process, not to interfere with most of the business decisions, because they don't have many business experience to start with. So that's not their goal. Their goal is to make sure after many issues we have had, like the DD US listing, like the Larkin Coffee issue, that make sure they are on top of these issues and try to have more effective monitoring schemes in these companies. So governance interferences so far, I think, is limited, but obviously it's a worrisome structure, I think, for some of the investors in these companies.
Okay, thank you. I mean, many of you might know that the UK Financial Reporting Council is reviewing the UK Corporate Governance Code at the moment. And one of the things that they're focusing in on is overboarding and how many directorships individuals have. So you talked about the long tenure issue as well, but really focusing in on individual director evaluations. So I know here in Japan, the references around evaluating the board as a whole, but we need to get more granular, focusing on effectiveness of committees and actual individuals, and then their re-election being contingent on the outputs of that evaluation. Anyone would like to make any statements or questions from the floor? We've got a question here. I've been going through the questions on the app, of which there have been many, so it's good to have one from the floor as well. There's just a mic coming.
Hi, I'm Réjean Nguyen from Adana Capital, Canada. Thank you for comments on the skill matrix and on the skill sets of the directors for evaluating their independence and contribution to the board. One question about the skill matrix, like, do you have any advice on how to build them or how to read them? Because there's some skill matrix in proxy statement that all the boxes are checked, and it's not very useful for an investor to read them, because you have this superpower board with super men and women everywhere that are expert in everything. So how should they refine this to make it more useful for investors?
The director's ego. So this is really what we're talking here. I'm independent, and I've got financial skills and I've got sector skills and all that. So I think we're lucky. In a small market, you can have those discussions, but definitely what you're looking for is one thing that can't be fudged is sector skills. So those real deep sector skills, or financial expertise, to the extent in New Zealand you need to have at least someone with a accounting degree, or more or less, on the finance on the audit committee. You also, I suppose, there's those intangible skills that we don't have a tick box for. Okay, so you can have boxes ticked by directors, and when they're chairing boards, all of a sudden other directors are resigning, yet they look all right, but actually something's not going on well there. But what I'd say is, please only tick the boxes that are your primary 3 skills. All right, so that's probably the way you'd go. And so you'd have marketing, perhaps those sorts of type of commercial skills coming in. We're seeing more health, safety, and sustainability skills, particularly when there's liability shooting through to the directors around safety. Of course, that's a whole different discussion.
Digitalization. Anyone else want to comment, George?
So I think I have the same concerns with you. And yes, I always ask the company to reduce the box ticked. That's the one thing. And the other thing is I always look at the attributes. I mean the upper, horizontal line. And that is very important, because I think that is the most important, how the companies select their attributes in the skill matrix. So I always look at that, and that will match the company's management plan, or what we as investors think the things the company should address. Then I think that is good. So I always talk with the attributes of the companies, and also ask the the number of the boxes ticked. That's what I did.
Did you want to comment on that?
Oh, not too much to the comprehensive answers already have, but I think we are also very focused on the linkage between the business and the expertise of the directors. I think the table that they have to explain that to us. How does that link to the business, the core business of the company, and why does this person has to be added on the board? I think if you can justify that, I think that's
Yeah, and I would echo that. So start with your company purpose, link it to your long-term strategy. Does it fit with your DEI policy and your succession plan? You've got those 4 things should be already written down and articulated. Extrapolate that out into the skills matrix.
Yeah.
There's a question over here. Oh, it was this lady here up front first, I think. This lady standing up.
There's a question. Thank you very much. It's a question for Nana and for George. Kerrie is from KLP Asset Management in Norway. It is slightly getting better, but we struggle with engaging with companies, especially in China and Japan. And when we reach out, we try to explain that this is of mutual benefit. So do you have any advice on how we can, urge the companies to engage with investors?
George.
That is a very important point. And you mean how to incentivize the company to talk to you? Very I think firstly, generally speaking, I think the engagement is likely to succeed when the companies have some issues to consult with investors. So I think you had a better, and I think that currently the many IR departments of the Japanese companies are very open to the overseas investors. So I think you had better send an email to what kind of things you think you have the issues, and then you said talk about this, and if possible, you include a kind of solution for the company. Then I think they will try to talk with you. That's what I thought. Yeah.
We'll go to the next question because we've got 3 minutes left.
So thank you so much. I'm Kaoru Kobu from Invesco Japan. 2 days ago, we heard that the public pension fund, 7 public pension funds in Japan will become a signatories of PRI. And what kind of expectation do you expect? What kind of impact do you expect from corporate engagement or a standard setting? Thank you. So question to anybody who can take.
Well, I would expect them to also become members of ICGN.
Yeah, we just stopped.
And the distinction genuinely is ICGN is all about the G. We don't believe sustainability objectives are achievable if you don't get your G right in the first place. So, and the 7 asset owners will put more pressure on their managers, we would expect, who will then also engage with investee companies to bring about better governance practices. I'm going to move on to another question because I'm conscious that we've got running out of time. This is the last question, I think, given the time.
Hi, thank you for the excellent session. Just curious how you see the topic of cyber governance emerging with boards of directors throughout Asia. Thank you.
Great question to conclude on. Let's have quick answers from Anne-Maree down to George.
Okay, so I think IA and ethics is going to be the really big question of our time, and that's what we'll be talking about in the future. And we're really looking at how boards are addressing that risk at the moment. They're unlikely to have a cyber expert on the board, so we're really looking at what are they doing within the organisation and who are they employing in their management teams to look at that.
Yeah, if just second to that, I think. For example, in China, I think this is already taken care of by the country very much. I think CAC has a lot to do about the national security. We heard so much about national security, such a balance between security and economy nowadays. So I think the question to the board is actually how do you within that context, how do you actually make sure you still can make sure your business is not disrupted too much from this interference from the government? So that is definitely something we will talk about with our companies going forward in the next, we started already, so still a quite important topic, I think, for the next short period of time.
Yeah, that's very important but difficult from the investors' side. But I also think that is the linked with the skill matrix where your question, relate with your question. When I saw someone very knowledgeable about cyber security, then I think that is that I could judge the company address that kind of issue. So I think that could be attributed to the board skill set. That's all. Yeah.
And of course, tech companies are famous for not having the most advantageous share structures for you all to make your influence in. So again, back to the original conversation, back to the policy engagement. But on that note, let me thank this fabulous panel for their contributions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks for all of the great questions. Thank you.